This image of primitive, fanatical brutality, armed with cutting-edge technology, is found in today's newspapers. So let me now move from 1898 down to 2009. A former Central Intelligence Agency analyst, his name is Bruce Riedel, he was asked by the Obama administration this year to evaluate the security threats in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And in the Washington Times, on July the 17th, he was quoted as saying, "A jihadi victory in Pakistan, meaning the takeover of the nation by a militant Sunni movement led by the Taliban, would create the greatest threat the United States has yet to face in its war on terror, and is now a real possibility in the foreseeable future." This paranoia continues today. Why do I say it's paranoia? Well, the Taliban force that Hillary Clinton said were just an hour's drive away from Islamabad had just been defeated in the Swat Valley, which is the northwest frontier province of Pakistan. That force amounted to just 4,000 soldiers or fighters. And the Pakistan military has 550,000 strong army, plus tanks, artillery, and fighter jets. I'm not minimizing the impact of the Taliban. I'm just trying to show that the headlines that are being bandied about and used as excuses for being there may be more, not fantasy, but certainly exaggerated. Others think the Taliban are somehow going to get hold of the nuclear triggers in Pakistan. There's some ideas that the Taliban could unite with junior officers in the Pakistani army, do a coup, and therefore get hold of the weaponry. But if you look at the history of Pakistan, most of the coups, in fact nearly all the coups, have been done by the top generals. Britain's role, you could summarize it in 2 words, was part of what's called the Great Game. It fought 3 wars, 2 in the 19th century and the 3rd one in 1919. You could say the British lost the first 2 and they came out with a draw in the 3rd one. In that 3rd war in 1919, the Afghan king wanted Britain to permit Afghanistan to conduct a sovereign foreign policy independent of Britain. And that was agreed to. And as soon as that was agreed to, he signed a treaty of friendship with the Soviet Union, which had just come into existence 2 years beforehand. This continuing rivalry with Russia is what we've read in the history books. What I would then say is, if you look at what I would say the reasons for this is something, I wouldn't call it the Great Game, I would call it control of Eurasia. And control of Eurasia has been a British construct which has then moved on to an American way of thinking. It started off in a talk by a British Jew strategist. His name was Harold Mackinder. And he gave a talk in 1906 to the Royal Geographical Society where he said it was absolutely crucial that Western forces must hold Eurasia if it wants to dominate the world. This has been updated in the 70s by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was a national security advisor for President Carter. He then became very influential in the Clinton years, and he's even said to the ear of President Obama today. And this essentially now includes China. So we're not just talking about competition with Russia, we're talking about preventing the control of the continent by Russia and China. And if you look on a map, you'll see you've got South Korea, where the US has 30,000 troops, in East Asia with a very friendly Japan, previous to this election last week, and in Southwest Asia, say on this side from your angle, you've got the US forces both in Iraq and in Afghanistan. Now, if this is true, and they have said this publicly, you've got to ask the question, why are we containing or even thinking of encircling China, the next superpower? We're quite happy for them to fund our government spending with treasury bonds. We're asking them to save our banks. We're asking them, in fact, to buy parts of Canary Wharf, as we have this week. So why are we trying to encircle them? Why do we need troops there? NATO is thousands of miles out of its zone. It was not created to fight a war in Asia. The Warsaw Pact no longer exists. There is no alliance against it, though one could form. It's called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and it's led by China and Russia, but at the moment it's more economic and political rather than military. In the short run, it looks like the Russians are quite content to let NATO bleed as a kind of revenge for its own disaster in the 1980s, and they're quite sure that the NATO will lose the war. General Gromov, who was the last Russian general in Kabul, he stated clearly that Obama's surge, Obama's war will not succeed. In the end, obviously, they want the withdrawal of Western armies. So if reason number one is control of Eurasia, let's move on to the next one. It's about fossil fuels. This subject is a great taboo. You won't find it mentioned too many times. I went to a meeting representing the Green Party, and after 2.5 hours, there was a whole bunch of experts. I was the first and only one to talk about the pipeline. And it was acknowledged that the pipeline was a great reason for this, but the question is, why wasn't it mentioned before? And if you look at today's debate, you don't see it mentioned. The Unocal, which is now part of Chevron, had ambitions to control the gas fields and supply markets, and the key market there is India. I've passed around a map, and you're not going to be able to probably see this very well, but if you see the white part is Afghanistan, and all the other lines around it are pipelines. And the point of Afghanistan is a conduit for a pipeline. The pipeline that the Americans wanted to put through has been called the TAP pipeline. It's got two definitions. Either you call it the Trans-Afghanistan pipeline, or it's the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan pipeline. To that was added the word I later for India, so it's TAP-I. Ever since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Western energy multinationals have been looking at Central Asia. This, what they call the stans, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, etc. For the next great energy bonanza. There are no new fields in the Middle East. The new fields, or the gas fields, are in Central Asia. And in the 1990s, I started talking about the good Taliban. Apparently in the 1990s, they're all good, because we were talking to them. In fact, in 1997, they sent a high-level delegation to the States. And today's President, Hamid Karzai, was a key facilitator in that visit. And the talks were advanced with a pipeline. There were no problems with it until there was a major terrorist incident. President Clinton then ordered a missile strike, this is in 1998, on Somalia. You may remember there was a chemical factory which turned out to be a medical facility in Somalia. He also sent missiles into Afghanistan. And as soon as that happened, negotiations broke down. Now, after the US invaded in 2001, was in October, by December, President Musharraf, Hamid Karzai, and the Turkmenistan president were able to sign off this TAP pipeline. So we know what the reason, I'll go into later what the alleged reasons for the war are, but you would have to say at least that the signing of the pipeline came with a bit of undue haste. And if we remember at that time, at the end of 2001, this was the high point of American confidence. Bush and Cheney felt they had won that war, and they didn't need to send any more troops there. They were going to send them to Iraq. So fossil fuels are certainly a very, very big factor, and it's an enduring factor before September 2001. Remember, I'm not talking about the 9/11. This is something that's been going on for some time. Less well known is that Afghanistan itself is rich